Hi, everyone. We're here to talk about another conversation. Oops, I'm so sorry. I'm looking to see if she's here now. Gena Jaffe is coming on today, and I am so excited. We're going to be talking about normalizing third-party reproduction, and we're going to be talking about how to open up the conversations in the medical community. So we're going to start that conversation off in just a minute. And for all of those that have been following our conversations, you know that what we really want to do is add this to the medical intake form, but include it in the conversation so that everybody becomes comfortable talking about third-party reproduction. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm so excited you're here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, please. Thanks for making the time. I know you're busy with those little ones
Yeah.
and work and everything else.
All the things.
I know. I know. And Connecting Rainbows has been doing such a great job.
Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you. It's
welcome.
been, yeah.
It's such a needed voice to have today. Uh, and, I think everybody's so grateful that you've been able
Oh,
to take that on.
thank you. It was an unintentional uh organization that I started. So didn't intend to, but here we are.
I think that's how so many great things happen in life.
Yeah.
It's just, you
Yeah.
kind of see a need, you see it happening, and you just, you just start it, you just go for it.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the evolution of a lot of things. I mean, that's how this conversation came up of changing the medical record, actually.
Yeah.
It was something that came up in one of my support groups where people were concerned about sharing the information about any type of donor conception when they went to the doctor.
Right.
And that's unfortunate because it improves the medical care and it improves the emotional impact of this, not just for the baby, but for the adult.
Right.
Everybody grows up and they get older. So when I got to chat with you about coming on, you were so receptive. So thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome.
I was wondering if you wanted to just talk a little bit about, what you were thinking when I had asked, or just how you started the organization and how you have been working so hard to get people to be comfortable and understanding the impact.
Yeah, I just as a backstory. So my wife and I have two kids. We went through reciprocal IVF. So they are her eggs and I carried, and we used donor sperm through a sperm bank. So unknown donor, but he's open. So we have an open ID donor. Um, and so I am the non-genetic mom. Um, Hi, Lindsay. So I'm the non-genetic mom, and I've had to work through a lot of stuff with that piece of
Of
it,
course
first of
you
all.
did. Of course you did. That's a
Yeah,
lot. That's a lot in itself.
yeah, yeah. And I have a social media business, like a personal one. So I shared our fertility journey on my Instagram account and my blog and all of that. And so I get questions all the time about fertility, especially, as an LGBTQ plus individual and couple. And so one piece that I shared, I'm also a lawyer. So one other thing that I shared was that we had to go through second parent adoption. So when you are a same-sex cis couple, or actually anybody using donor gamete, you get to go on the birth certificate, but you are not both considered the legal parents of that child. Um, so funny enough, it's not funny, but ironically,
Heartbreaking enough. I would say heartbreaking enough, actually.
right? Ironically, my wife, the genetic mom, had to adopt her own genetic children because I was considered the legal parent because I was the gestational mom, gestational carrier. So the birthing person is considered the legal parent. And when I shared this, there was like an uproar. Like people were like, what is happening? Like, no one knows about this. And another thing is that it's not only that like the community doesn't know, a lot of lawyers don't know either. It's a very like art law is like a very niche and specialized area of law.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I was, kind of talking about this and sharing our story, so we went through the process in December of last year because we had a COVID baby. So when I had shared that, people then were like, well, I talked to a lawyer in this state and in this state, and they said the birth certificate was fine. And I was like, well, they are wrong. And I realized a need for initially just like a directory of attorneys that specialize in art and surrogacy, all of that. And so I was like, I'm just going to create a directory. I am a lawyer. I know where to find these people. But then that very quickly kind of exploded now into a major organization, and now recently doing advocacy for donor conceived people. Again, unintentionally, but I'm raising two of them. So here we are.
There you are. Yeah. Well, they're blessed that, you know, I was going to say they're blessed to have you, but it works both ways. But really what I'm trying to say is that it's wonderful that you kind of help you see this position and you're able to go with it and run with it and develop this organization, because so many people need this information. And as you were talking, I didn't know part of what you were just saying. And so I didn't realize it was a gestational carrier that was the legal parent when it's a couple that's married.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't put it together that way. I figured if it was a couple that was married, then it would be different. So I had actually received your name from a lawyer and to be told about the organization that you're building. And there's so many legal ramifications when it comes to donor conception that we just don't think about. We kind of focus on the emotional piece, which is huge. And it really can't be underscored enough, because it's something that everybody has to go through. And you hope that you go through it prior to the birth of the child, because it makes it easier. But it's not, yeah, you continue though. It's something that's always there, I believe.
But I think that, yes. So it's always the work to be done is always there. But I think that what I've come to realize, and especially with reflecting on my own journey, is that the work isn't done before the children are born, because you're only so focused on having the child that you're only focused on your own feelings and your own desires. And so I haven't been able to switch and think about, like, change my beliefs until after I had my children, because then I'm like, oh, I need to see things from their perspective as a child, as a donor conceived child. Before that, it's really only you're thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's important though. I think it's important to think about yourself and the impact it's having on you, so that when this person comes into the world, you can then help that person understand their story and their.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No,
So
you
it's a
totally need to.
really important element, I believe, that you have to go through, or it's important to go through.
Yes, for sure. No, definitely advocating for going through it beforehand. But I don't think that there's enough education out there on what to do and how to do it, and that it is even going to, like, be a thing. I don't know. I was just very naive, and I feel like most recipient parent intended parents are not in a, yeah, I don't know, just in an innocent way of like, oh, it's, we'll deal with this as it comes. I was the person that was like, oh, well, we have an open donor, like that will, my kids will know when they're 18. So they're always going to know their donor conceived because we're a lesbian couple. We'll cross that path at 18, not thinking throughout that 18 years, there's going to be a whole lot of stuff that comes up.
All our questions.
A whole lot of stuff. And like you're advocating for, like, changes in medical forms and stuff. Like, I never thought about the impact it would have on my child.
Yeah. One of the things that came out of the support group, and one of the things that I do with people who I work with, I had written a book. The book I wrote was, and I'm sorry to say this, but the book I wrote was more geared towards heterosexual couples, but it could easily be applied to the LGBTQ plus community. The feelings are the same, right? It's about a dream. It's a dream to have a child.
Right.
And it's the journey to have the child and then realizing you need a donor. So, and it's a very short, it's a children's book, but the book is really more a story for the parent to embrace their journey so that they can then tell the story to the child.
Yeah.
And it's an exercise I give people in my support groups to do, or people who I'm working with individually, regardless of their partners. And the purpose of it really is to help you through this process and to help you through the journey, so that you can begin to feel more comfortable with it. But there's not enough information out there. I agree with you on the feelings associated with using donor conceived gamete.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what I'm realizing is that, especially as the non-genetic parent, like, there's just so much work to be done on myself to be prepared for what's to come with our journey. We know of 8 siblings.
Uh,
So as of now, who knows how many there are?
right.
So we know of them. We've kind of gone that route and done that, kind of that journey. And we're very open with our kids. I mean, my son is 4.5, so it's how much can he understand? But we talk about it. But I don't know. It's so interesting. I'm so grateful for being where I am now, especially like with my son not being super old or aware. But I'm just realizing there's a lot of things to unpack in myself. And so I think that I love that you're really talking about preparing you as an intended parent before the child's even here, as to like really unpacking that so that you can be as supportive as you can for your child.
Yeah, but a voice like yours to say, something we need to look at and it's something we can pay attention to is important, because there's, I think, different journeys, whether you're heterosexual versus LGBTQ, right? Plus, because if you're in a heterosexual couple, you don't really go into it anticipating donor anywhere along the line.
Right.
But if you're not, then you do. But then if you're in a situation where you are, and it's such a loving situation where you're carrying, your wife's eggs, and this is not uncommon today that
Mm-hmm.
people are doing this. It's actually becoming a common practice, and it's a lovely practice. Then there's still feelings associated with it, but we don't tend to focus on that quite as much as we should.
Right. Right.
So it's great to shine a little spotlight on that and let people know that there's feelings associated with this. And even though it's a wonderful outcome, it doesn't mean that the feelings aren't there. And I do think they stay with you, but just they change and they shift. And
Yeah.
they do. And now your little one, right? He's 4.5. He's going to start asking where babies come from. He's going to start.
Oh, he knows. We read books. I love the book What Makes a Baby. It's gender neutral. It's a sperm and an egg and a uterus. And
Right.
so we talk about that, and he doesn't grasp what that is, but you know what I mean? But he knows that he started in mama's belly, and then he was mixed with sperm from his biological father, or we say biological person. We don't know how the man identifies. Well, I think he identifies as a man, but and then you grew in mommy. So it's nice. It's nice for me to feel included in that part, because I know that part of your work is medical forms. My medical history doesn't matter. My medical history is irrelevant. But yeah, I think that what I've learned a lot from DCP is just normalizing everything from the beginning, and it becomes part of their story.
Yes.
That yes, you have a biological father. He doesn't live in our house. And how I explained it to my son is that our cousins don't live with us. Our grandparents don't live with us. They're still family, but they don't live here. And my son has actually started asking questions, and he's 4.5, because we show him pictures, and he's like, I want to find him. And I'm like, where do you think he lives? Because I don't know where he lives. But
yeah, it's how you want to tell your story. It's how anybody wants to tell their story and how they're comfortable telling it. And that's the most important piece of it. It's not easy to tell the story, but kind of preparing yourself for the way you want to, I think, is the easiest kind of road to go down, to kind of think about it as much as you can. And then listen, you never know what a 4-year-old's going to ask you or a 24-year-old's going to ask you. You just don't know, And then when it comes time for siblings, our world is becoming transparent in many ways, but in many ways it is not. And our world is becoming accepting in many ways, and in many ways it's not. And so through opening up conversations, we can help that. And we can help that for everyone. We can help it for the intended parents. We can help it for the adults, right, who are conceived through donor conception. We can help it for the medical community. And one of the concerns I had was really, how can the medical community not ask this question?
Right.
And it didn't make sense to me. But when I thought about it, I was involved with when they first developed electronic medical records. It wasn't on the table. It wasn't anything anybody thought about. But now it's there. Now we need to think about it.
Yeah.
And it's not just putting it on the medical record. That's kind of the tool, but it's the tool to get the conversation going.
Right.
It's the tool so that people start to feel comfortable in their own skin.
Right. Right.
And yeah, and the person sitting next to you who's looking at the form says, "Oh, it's just another birth story. It's another way to be conceived."
Well, I've actually, been talking to a bunch of different donor conceived people who said that every time they have to fill out a medical form, they're reminded that they don't know half of their medical history.
Right.
Um, when it says like who's your biological father, and or it says father or mother, and um, then if you don't know it, Lindsay, Lindsay, who's on here, said to me that she's always like, "Oh, the doctor must assume that my mom had a one night stand, or I don't know who my father is," and then you feel that shame, and
Yes.
so to be able to, yeah, check that box off of I'm donor conceived, I don't know that half, or I'm adopted, I don't know, I think can just really help um, with
Yeah.
the
And
emotional
this
burden
is
of,
it's and to feel shame about how you were born. It's exactly what you said. It takes a sperm, uterus, and an egg. That's
right.
we're all here the same exact way. It's very sad. This form is not just in the medical community though, right? It's on college applications. It's on
Mm,
preschool applications. It's on a whole
yeah.
host of forms.
Well, fortunately, the ones that we fill out, it usually says parent, which is lovely. And our kindergarten enrollment application actually asked what my child's pronouns were. So that is lovely.
Wow.
Um, yeah, not a public school. So, um, yeah, but no, I think that the past year, there's been a big shift in a lot of things. Hopefully, we're just continuing to move more and more towards inclusivity and openness and um, yeah, just all the ways that people are different and unique and wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely true. When you fill out a form, when you go to the doctor's office for your child, what do you think the impact would be, or how do you think you would feel if that word other was replaced with donor, or if you're adopted, because adoptees go through this also in many ways?
Yeah, no, I think that it really just takes more of the emotion out of I don't know this because I I started feeling guilty of like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Like, I mean, I have the medical history from whenever, you know, they
Mhm.
donated, but I don't have anything updated of like,
Right? Well, you wouldn't.
but I don't know. I don't know. And so then part of me feels guilty. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I putting are my kids at risk now? Of like, I have a daughter now. Does the biological grandmother have breast cancer in her family? I don't know. I don't, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that started to hit me recently, of things that like I don't know. So I am reminded
Mhm.
um, of that when I have to fill things out. Obviously, my children don't fill them out on their own, but I would assume that when they get a little bit older, they would definitely prefer to be able to check that box because otherwise it's like, no, I don't know who they are. I think that there's a little bit of a stigma that comes along with that because again, like you said, it's like, oh, did your mom have a one night stand or like,
Right. Or it makes it, the reason why we came up with the word normal, I didn't really love the word normal when we were thinking of names for this, but when we came up with the word normal, it's because everybody wants to feel included and
yeah,
everybody wants to feel, the same in many ways.
right.
Although we all want to be unique and different, we want to feel as if certain things are just the same.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of this, to have it that way. And when I hear stories of people who are filling out college applications and putting down other, I really feel badly. They have to write other and adopted. They're going through a time in their life when it's exciting. And to
Right.
have to lament over something that maybe is not exciting to them, that they don't have the information on, is sad in some ways. And when you fill out an application and you don't know the history of a donor, which many times you don't because donors are young and you only have so much medical history on them, so you don't know. That's just the reality. It's the reality of this journey. And many times, people who are using their own egg and their own sperm. They may have grandparents who passed away very young, and they may not know any of their family history either. But we don't really think of it that way. We think
Right.
of it more as if we should know all of this information, and we don't have it. We just don't. And then if I kind of wanted to circle back, if that's okay with you for a minute, when you're talking about that you were the one who was carrying, and that is such an important role in this
Yeah.
journey of this person, because that is like the person who the baby knows when they first are
Yeah.
born, right? You're the person who they heard the voice of, who fed them and everything else, and nurtured them.
And I do know that like I play a role in like what genes are turned on and off and like all of this
Epigenetic.
cool epigenetic stuff. Yeah, for sure. But my medical history is not relevant, and it's
I've heard mixed things on that, quite frankly. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but I've heard mixed things about epigenetics and whether or not the carrying parent should put down some of their medical history or not. So I don't have all of the science and the research behind it, but with epigenetics, there is a bit of thought that, and one of the doctors I've been working with did say that you should put down donor conceived, but also the parent who is carrying the child should put down their history as well, because we don't
interesting.
know how much is turned on and how much is turned off, and we don't know how much absorption there is just yet.
Right. It's all crazy. Crazy, magical. Yeah, science is, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. But, it takes three things, and in some cases, it takes three people. And there's a beauty to that. There really
Mhm.
is. And ultimately, the children are raised in a home where they're really loved. And now, not only are they loved, we want to let them know what their birth story is, if we choose to. And
Well,
we want the world to be comfortable asking about it.
I possibly unpopular opinion, but I don't think that it really is the parent's choice. I
Yeah.
think that everyone deserves the right to know where they came from and their story, and that like I think that we're seeing that now in the donor conceived adults, the impact that the lying and the secrets have had on them.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'll tell you why I put that caveat in.
yeah,
I work with people who come from communities where it's shunned.
sure.
And so I work with people who have moved from communities because they weren't even supposed to conceive through donor conception. So
Mm-hmm.
they've literally uprooted their life in order to have the child. And then I work with people where it's just unspoken because they're afraid that in religious communities, their child, as they grow up and become an adult, won't be able to get married, or they'll be the topic of conversation. So I think the choice with some of the people is not that they don't want to tell, but that they're afraid of the implication of telling. It's very interesting. It becomes really complex. And if only
Yeah.
they knew one other person in that situation. So I'm working with a few religious organizations right now, actually, to see about how to open up that conversation.
Yeah, I actually did a webinar with an Orthodox Jewish, with an Orthodox Jewish rabbi about LGBTQ plus families, like
Exactly.
growing your families and stuff, and yeah, just the kind of the nuances there. But I think that what you were saying, and I'm grateful that I have a very accepting family, and but what I hear from that is that it's completely parent focused, right? It's what do I, as the parent, feel about the situation and about how I'm growing my family. And they're not thinking about the child and what the child feels.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned so much. This is like literally, it's
I have to
been,
tell you, I love the way you put that. I absolutely love it. I could give you the rationale because I've heard it and I've spoken about it, right? And it's the people who I work with, it's an issue of torment. And so
I
it's
want to challenge them if they're listening. because I'm in this, guys. Like I am a recipient parent. I'm not a donor conceived person. I cannot speak for them,
Mhm.
but my children are.
Yes.
And my children, their truths, their stories, their backgrounds, their heritage, their ancestry that has nothing to do with me and everything to do with their biological father is their story
Mhm.
that they have a right to know about.
Yeah.
And for a really long time, I wanted nothing to do with the siblings, biological siblings. I always wanted to know who the donor was. I was like, I want to thank this guy and like, buy him a car. Um, but I felt threatened. I did. I felt threatened. I'm a non-genetic mom. I felt threatened that there were people out there that shared more with my children than I ever could. Um, I'm like getting emotional because like
Oh, it is emotional.
it is very emotional. But I needed to put myself in my kids' shoes and say that this is not about me. This is about them, and that I'm not going to be replaced. Like I'm not being replaced.
Right.
This is their story,
Yes.
and this is their, like, they just, I don't know. I just feel like I'm a battery. We intentionally always chose an open ID donor because we didn't feel that it was our choice to say to our kids, like, no, you can't. We don't know anything. You can't find this person. Um, so I feel like that's like not telling them the story is. I've just been speaking to so many different donor conceived individuals who didn't find out until they were so much older,
Yeah.
and it's very traumatic.
It's horrible for them. I mean, you just don't know what else hasn't been told to you. And then you just
Right.
feel
It's
really lost, right? Who am I? And all of this
yeah, and it
come around.
and the trust. There's a
Huge.
it shouldn't be shameful. Like they are not. It's kind of like you feel ashamed of who your child is, and I like that. Like half of them, at least, that it's kind of like, are you ashamed of half of me? The kind of a
What do you
thing,
think?
you know?
Is it that they're ashamed of who the child is, or are they ashamed that they could not conceive a child on their own? And that's really the
I think
question.
it's a little bit of both. If you're not, um,
I think the child might interpret it as if the parent is ashamed of them, but truly this is the parent's story. There's three paths on this. And if anybody's listening who's heard me say this like for the 100th time, I'm sorry.
I've
But
never heard it, so
okay, so there's the path of the person who gives birth to the child, right? In your case, it's your path, it's your wife's path, and then it's your child's path. And everybody's going down a road and a journey, but everybody has their own path on it. You come at the same point, but you don't want to confuse those roads. You don't want to confuse the paths. So each person has to be comfortable with their own and their own story, if that makes sense to you. So if you're comfortable with your story and your wife is comfortable with hers, and you're able to work that out, then your child can be comfortable with theirs. If you're not comfortable with yours,
right,
then it will
yeah,
be hard for your child to be comfortable with his or her.
right, yeah, exactly. Which is why I had said I think that there's so much work to be done as a parent,
Yes.
because you need to own your story. But I think that what I'm more advocating for is that you, as an intended parent, as a recipient parent, you don't have a choice. You need to do the work for your kids.
Yeah.
That's like for me the switch for me when I was like, I'm doing this for my children. It's not easy at all. A lot of crying, a lot of like really deep internal reflection, and um, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I think is what's really important, and what I've learned DCP are advocating for, just
Yeah.
shifting how things were in the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
90s, and of just like the secrecy and the lies and the shame and all of that, that your child's story is beautiful, and yeah.
So if we could open up this conversation
Yeah.
If we could just start to open it up, that shame and that secrecy could go away.
Yeah.
So if we could have society start to think about it as just another beautiful way to give birth,
Yeah.
as parents who truly want children to be able to raise children in homes that they're wanted in, and cared for, then that would help this process for the parents to feel comfortable and for the child.
Yeah.
So the thought is, let's just start with the medical record. Let's
Right.
start where it begins. Let's start in the medical community, because the medical community doesn't even ask the questions. They're not even comfortable with it. So there's two paths. And you know what's wild? I mentioned this before, but not to you. But I went to an OB, and she told me that she never even asks the question when somebody comes in who's delivering, when she takes on a new patient, whether or not the child is biologically theirs or not. I thought that was fascinating. Like, why wouldn't that be part of an intake? How is the child conceived? It didn't even, I couldn't even fathom that. So if we can't get the medical community comfortable talking about it, that's not a good thing.
Right. 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 They're the ones who are helping to create the families.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to do this, right? One is we have a petition, we have a letter writing campaign. We're asking doctors to start to change it simply in their own practices. And the other is to start at a higher level. We want to go to the AMA, and we want to go to different areas to try and get the word out. So
Yeah.
you had started to mention that as a mom, when you go to the doctor's office, if you had that option there, if you think it would make you feel differently, and it does with the school system,
Mm-hmm.
but do you think it would, like if you went to an emergency room, it was the last thing on your mind about how the child was conceived, right? All you're thinking about is get my child healthy and get them well.
Yeah.
And I've had adults come to me and tell me that they've gone to the emergency room, whether they're adopted or conceived through donor conception. They totally forget. It's not the first thing on their mind when they're in a situation like that. So,
Right.
so in that case, it does help, because we don't want people to go down a path of investigating or just assuming when
Right.
when there's nothing to assume. And we see this with a lot of, like I say, the creologies, like so cardiology, endocrinology, neurology, hematology, all of these things where there's DNA or biological links. We want to be sure that they start to ask about it.
Right.
And a big way to help with that is when people go to the doctor, to ask them to include it in the form in their intake. And it's not a big ask, although it feels like one.
Hey, they all just changed their forms to include pronouns.
Right, I
You know?
know. And that was like after I started asking about this. I'm like, geez, they did that quickly.
Right. Like, how much quickly? Yeah, right.
Louder, stronger voice. What can I tell you? But we need those voices here too, because it goes along with the same thing. It goes along with everybody being included, everybody feeling comfortable. So I appreciate you coming on to talk about this today. We're doing a webinar in a couple of weeks, focused on the mom and on the donor conceived adult person.
Awesome.
And so that will be really great. We've already done the first one, and I'm glad to say we're gaining support slowly but steadily. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you for that. On behalf of my kids.
Yeah, well, no, thank you. Thank you on behalf of like all these people I work with, because I think that's how you see a need. You see a need that just should be filled, and hopefully it gets to be filled. And we do actually have our first medical intake form that was changed at ART Compass. So that was very exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was exciting. That's exciting.
Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for sharing today.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Of course, of course.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you. And give those kids a hug when they wake up from nap time.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.